Hello, this is George Sandman. I'm the founder and CEO of Growth Drive. And Growth Drive is a system used by business advisors to drive client profits, growth, and value. Now, we're also a community. Every week we get together to talk about all things business advisor, everything clients, cases, things we're seeing out in the world. Now, tune in here to this podcast, and you can join the conversation by scanning this QR code, passcode 867-5309. Jump into the conversation. Everyone's welcome. We're looking forward to having you. So here we go. On with the show.
Well, what's everybody up to? Any exciting new work you're doing? I know Jeff's working on a book, but any new exciting work anybody's up to?
Just helped a 70-some-odd-year-old business owner sell her business. It was somewhat accidental, but it worked out beautifully. She trusted me. She was very open, very transparent, and it created a really good marriage for about 6 months. And it would have taken probably 3 months had there not been 3 feet of snow in Erie that waylaid the process. with the ultimate owners who bought the company. They had 8 kids and they couldn't all get into town. Well, they were in town, but we were stranded over Thanksgiving break. And we couldn't regroup until January, February. But
How'd you meet her?
wrap that up.
How'd you meet her?
I was an economic development entity brought me in to take a look at her basically second generation website, which was horrific. One conversation led to another, and I happened just to casually ask. She's in her 70s, and I've got a personal story that kind of goes with this. But I said, so if you're not able to work for 3 months, who's running the business? And it got pretty quiet. And it's not that she didn't know this, but I think I poked the dog a little bit. And one thing led to another. Next thing you know, she wanted me to buy it. I didn't want to own a distribution business. And one thing led to another. And we just gelled. We'd met each other socially 15 years earlier. Kids were in the same school for a while, but didn't really know each other. So it's really, really neat. It's like we were old friends.
So cool.
And now she's referred me to someone who's smaller, who might be a bolt-on to the company that just bought her business. Well, the person called her and said, would you like to buy me? She said, well, I can't. And she said, why not? I said, well, I just sold, but you can talk to Jeff. He helped me. So that's really cool. We'll find out where that goes on Friday. I had a great conversation yesterday, and we'll probably work together. So that was kind of fun.
Someone once said work begets. Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
I was just going to throw in the comment that someone once said work begets work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You show up and things happen, right?
Crisp momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Joe and I've got a pleasant project that we're working on that's, it started off at a simple project, and it's probably going to expand significantly as we started to dissect it. But when you're working with a $45 million business, it's nice to see that there's opportunities where the business can grow. If somebody sets the goal and puts people in motion to do it, rather than say, I own the business, so I'll run out and do all that stuff. And then I'm going to run the business, and I'm going to take care of, I'm going to take care of if the flat tire goes flat, I'll be over there to help change the tire on the truck too. And the signage on one of the advertising locations fell down, so I'll go over and put it back up.
Did you ask him Jeff's question? What happens if you're gone for 3 months?
Joe did. Joe, tell him what happened.
Where to begin? It's been heavy on his mind. Several relatives involved. I actually went into the danger zone, if you will, and talking about family get-togethers. And the son-in-law is involved, and he's like, it's this company. It's all this company, OM, all day, all night, right? So, I mean, the whole company lives and the whole family lives and breathes around this organization. So, yeah, it's immersive experience. And so they're trying to figure out how to decouple that a little bit. So, but there's a lot of, you just don't know any different. And so in that case, you introduce the different ideas of what if you could make the business a lot less dependent on the owner. And it's refreshing, but it's also just scary as hell for the owner. Right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've got very little practical experience working with family multi-generation businesses. I've been a beneficiary of one, my grandfather on my wife's side, and but that's about it. Most of the time, family represents serious problems for what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, about 20 years ago, I worked with a client with three brothers as owners, and the problem is with the three-headed leadership organization, it was difficult to figure out who was going to be the prime leader. And one of the biggest things we looked at was what were the goals of each of the three brothers. And by getting the goals defined, it became very simple that it would be great if two of the brothers left and went into what they were really interested in doing.
Yeah.
And, Murphy's Law says that if you've got two good men and you let them find a new job and a new opportunity, they'll be more than successful. The youngest one went into leaving the industry he was in. He went into the boat making business that you put on, shall I say, yachts. And so he sold the life-saving boats and stuff like that. He ran it. It was in there in charge of sales for 10 years, and they tripled the revenue. It went from 10 million to over 30 million. They were on their way to 40 million when somebody came in and offered to buy it. And he had to walk away with 10 million for his participation ownership of the company. And the brother who was leading the original business said, I couldn't have been any happier because it made he and his wife and family so much more satisfied. And he would never have achieved that working and staying with me. And the third brother went out to an adjacent industry and likewise has taken it to almost $8 million. And both of the brothers remain in that industry and not competitors, but they do different services. Same market, get along fantastic.
And holidays are better.
A lot better, a lot better. As a matter of fact, they go to the younger guy's house because he now has this beautiful multi-million-dollar house.
That's a book right there. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've got a friend out in Iowa. Eric and I met when we were at the EPI conference, Molly, and she's got a rough draft of a book that she's getting ready to publish, self-publish, and it's about a family-run multi-generation business. And it doesn't have a happy ending. It's got an okay ending, but like I don't think there's enough stuff out there about these dynamics that you're talking about, Ed. You're like, I know Eric's got deep experience with family run businesses, but it's like I think there's going to be a real opportunity for me to refer a lot of business out whenever I encounter those dynamics.
Yeah, that's one of the things that went smoothly was because of my age differential to the people. I walked graciously amongst all three of them and helping them to take the time to define what they really wanted to be doing and ignored what they were doing for a second. And, it's not often you can get them to willingly do that. But once we did that and I got them to go through a couple of self-analysis assessments, et cetera, then they were much more open because they started to talk about what was really moving them and interesting to them and not talking about what the other brothers were doing that was contrary to what they liked. And instead they focused on their goals and their direction and opportunities.
Yeah, the family dynamics are interesting, aren't they? Often there's a legacy problem. Dad probably started it and all the sons are in it and there's, old or all the kids are in it and oldest kid thinks that they should have something. One of my best friends, the guy who introduced my wife and I, he's the youngest child in a set of four children. and he's the one running the business, and all the rest of them are out of the business. Happens to be a banking business, and you just watch some of the dynamics of the family and how it all plays out. And Ed, I'm sure you've seen this, maybe all of you have seen this, but you also have ownership versus working in the business, right? Are the who's owners and who are actually working in the business, and how do you handle those issues of, I always say the working gets you a salary, ownership gets you dividends, right? And so let's talk about acting and being treated like an owner, and let's talk about acting and being treated like an employee. And then let's sort out, again, fair and equal in those situations and figure out how we treat everyone. But to your point on your story, Ed, sometimes the best thing is to get the people who are only there because they think they should be there, not because they really want to be there, out or into a different role or playing a different instrument in the whole thing, right? Shift their role, shift their responsibilities. Do they go from being an employee to just an owner? Do they go out completely from being an owner and an employee? All those things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the unique things that you can have happen. And I'm struggling with one right in Texas right now where dad does not want to let daughter dictate and do everything because of a 50-50 split. And when I met with him, I emphasized to him that he thinks that when he passes his two sons who are not in the business, and he's been in the business from the start, working and contributing, when he passes, they should pick up his salary plus his equity.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told him that won't happen, and you cannot support that because they don't want to work in a business because they're both in their own careers doing very well, employed by themselves at their own job opportunities, in totally unrelated industries, and have no desire to be in the business, but they'll love to have some of the economic benefit of the business in the form of a dividend.
Yep.
Is that where
Separation of ownership versus employee.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, in the 90s, I worked for a company back in my employee days, and I was the CFO of the company, and Dad ran it as the CEO president. Dad was 81. I knew this because he and I shared a birthday, and he was exactly 50 years older than I was. And son was in the business with his wife, doing a lot of the business, and at 50 some odd, 55 some odd years old, Dad didn't think he was ready yet. Had nearly finished a PhD. Son had given up his school to come work with Dad. It wasn't a super sophisticated business. It was a petroleum distribution business and manufacturer and distribution of ice. Like there were some issues there are some interesting dynamics there, but it wasn't this highly technical business, and Dad just couldn't let it go.
And I think that's one of the things that it's hardest thing to explain to a founder, that the business, if it's going to succeed, has to have a new visionary. You were the visionary, and your vision now is getting impaired by energy, health, and age. What we need to do is put a new visionary in that role. Doesn't mean that you won't be the chairman of the board, but like most big, large public corporations, the chairman of the board is not the CEO of the company. And I think that's the biggest thing, to take the time and walk gently with that elderly individual and say, your insight was awesome and your vision was beautiful, but the company now needs to pick up what you did and move it faster and further. But you don't have that ability right now because you're at that stage in your life where you can't have and work a 50 or 60-hour week because it's impractical, and you don't have the physical body that can sustain that type of level of energy.
Yeah, I think I think those are fair arguments, Ed. I think another argument is the next generation doesn't raise their kids the same way the generation before them did. They often
Exactly.
take some of those things they learned and some of the things they say, yeah, I want to keep doing that because I love that my parents did that and I'm going to do that. And they also look at some things and say, I hated that my parents did that and I'm going to do it differently, right? And and as times change, you need change in your business to adapt to the new times. And that's what generational change often drives, is that next generation comes in and says, you guys started it and did this, but now we got to do this over here because this generation now wants it a little differently. And so I think there's a healthy aspect of the turning over the reins to the next generation, in that it's about understanding that change has to happen, and that change is healthy, and doing it in a healthy manner. I always look at it like the parents who hold on to their kids so tightly that they don't let them do anything, and the kids go off to college and then they do everything, right? Everything they were told they couldn't do, right? If you do that, if you keep them so tight, when they finally get their chance, they're going to go do all the things. If you take the other path, which is, hey, we're going to just give you more and more as you can handle it, by the time they get to college, they're like, well, I already had a glass of wine. I already had a beer. I don't need to go get drunk every night. Like, I know what it tastes like. Like, there's a different attitude towards it. That doesn't mean I don't go out and have fun and maybe have a party with my friends, but I don't feel the need to do it to the extreme all the time, because it's not I'm going to do whatever the hell I want because mom and dad didn't let me do anything kind of attitude, right? And so you get the same thing in that transition of family businesses. That radical turn comes because you haven't let them do anything.
Exactly. And at the end of this month, I've got a meeting with the owner of a firm that just finished 110 million. And that's all I'm focusing on is, I did evaluation for estate planning, but the real bottom line of the meeting is going to be getting comfortable with letting somebody else set the tone for the business, because you've been doing it for 46 years and you need to let the next person step up and start picking and choosing what tones need to be reset in light of the changing marketplace.
Whether you like it or not, it's going to change at some point.
Well, I was about to make that point.
So do you want to participate in the change, or do you want to have the change happen after you're gone and you have no control over it?
And see, that's one of the big things I make point of and saying is, anybody can get run over by the truck, or you can have a catastrophic brain thing occur overnight. But if you've got a chance right now to talk about how you'd like to see it transition and know who's going to take it over, why not start that discussion now so that people can prepare? And if they're not prepared or they don't want to do it, then look for alternatives. And I worked on a project in Kentucky where the owner wanted to retire at 69, and he was figuring out that his son-in-law was the best person to step in at 42 to take over and run the business. And they had a psychologist go in and evaluate all the family members that were working, etc. Turned out the son-in-law did not want the stress and responsibility. And the day they announced he was the one chosen, he had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's horrible.
42 years old. So,
Hey,
you have to be
I
prepared.
wonder if we started a conversation. Good morning, guys. I decided I would jump in for a few minutes before I go.
Who are you again?
Who's that guy? I hope everyone's doing well this morning. Ed, this is a great conversation because the case that was brought up in the study group last week was on this exact issue. And the family ended up having a family meeting, like forgetting the business for a while, having a family meeting and deciding that actually the best path forward was to hire a professional operator to come in and run the business. And I can't help but wonder I'd love your perspective, guys. if we sit down with the founder and say, hey, listen, let's avoid the entire, we need to have some succession planning, because, you know, frankly, that's just the responsible thing to do, and use that as the lens through which to talk about succession, and to talk about, you know, who the best person is, because often the next generation, if they don't want to run the business, that's one problem, or the founding generation doesn't think they're capable. That's kind of gross. But might starting this through the lens of succession planning be a great way to really open the jar? What do you think?
I always start even one step further back, George. What as an owner or as a founder, what are your dreams for your business? What do you want to have happen? Do you care that the business goes on, or did you just build this to monetize it?
You know,
if your goal isn't to have it go on, then why even talk about succession or whatever? Just talk about selling it, right?
you know, guys, I feel like this topic comes up so often. Eric, that's a great point. And I'm wondering, as the committee finalizes I put out a general discussion of what our goal is for the conference and where the conversations have gone to date. I wonder if we should talk as a committee about we're going to have a couple of successful exits in the room. You know, several guys who have grown and sold their businesses. And it seems to me that presents an opportunity to discuss this, you know, to weave this conversation into the the summit.
George, I couldn't agree more. And I just think we often jump to the assumption that we know what the right thing is for them to do.
Such a sin. Yeah, Eric. Yeah.
And I think we always need to stop and say, what is it you want to do and why? And oftentimes they don't even really know the answer to that question until and Ed, you hit on this before, you got to pin them down and say, what are you trying to do? Why is this important? What is it that you feel strongly about that issue? Or why do you feel your son-in-law is the best? What are you trying to do? I want this company to keep going. Okay. So that's a different thing than saying your son-in-law has to run it. So now let's peel that onion back.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right. You know, it's funny, Eric, because you're getting at a riff on the growth conversation, right? We use all of our facilitation skills to listen like crazy and to dig in. You know, it requires a lot of trust and vulnerability. And by the way, if the client isn't trusting and vulnerable, that's a qualifier right there.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So that's a great point.
You're never going to get anywhere if the client won't participate in the whole conversation.
I think something that's really powerful here that I've experienced this twice, having the types of conversations that you guys are talking about. And I just walked in going, I am going to demythologize this legacy concept up front and let the owner A, bring up legacy, not me. And then B, have them define what that is. And it was so funny because I was just following like a normal coaching process. Joe will laugh, right? You know, so the owner goes, well, I really want to create this legacy and I want the business to continue. I'm like, cool. Why? And he goes, well, I go, I mean, it's not right or wrong. Like, there's nothing wrong with you selling the business to an outside person. I said, can I ask you a really quick question? Like, does the person you've designated as your successor have the ability to get a loan for $25 million? And he went, no. And I said, okay. I said, cool. There's lots of ways we can skin this cat. I'm just asking the questions. And like a week later, he was with me at the Exit Planning Institute conference. He goes, I think I'm just going to sell the whole son of a bitch, maybe in a couple of years. And they're good people. They can find their way. I'm not in charge of their lives. I'm like, exactly. He goes, because what I want to do is travel. Right. And I've been thinking about what you said, and I don't know if I'm going to be around for another 10 years. Just trying to demyth it, take away, because I think a lot of people hear these words legacy and they haven't really thought about what that means. They're uncomfortable with it. They don't know how to define it. And it's some of the conversations you've had with me, George, privately, really trying to have me really dial in on what I wanted to have happen. They've been really great. They've been very uncomfortable. Thank you. Sort of. but like, I don't know. That was my take on what you guys were sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And by the way, Jeff, good morning, man. Jeff Parnell, have you guys had a chance to meet?
Just casually. Yeah. Good morning.
Cool. Good morning.
Steve, were you jumping in with a comment there?
I was just going to make an obvious comment since, that's my level. But when we're having a growth conversation, one of the first questions, of course, is where do you want to go?
Yep.
I.e., what's your goal? Well, it's the same thing with exit planning.
It is.
So what's your goal?
It is. And I think the difficulty, Steve, in it is in the growth conversation, we all understand that there are a lot of paths and any one of them are equal. I think when we go into the exit side, I think we know we make assumptions of which one would be best, and we think we know which one might fit them best. And we jump the shark a little bit thinking we got this already versus stepping back and saying, forcing them to wrestle with what are the options and why are they good for them?
That's super interesting, Eric. I wonder, we have the oil well exit option, right? It's something that EPI and BEI don't discuss, but we do discuss as a community. We discuss it in C3D is the oil well option. Like, listen, man, we don't need to get into that conversation because what we're going to do is we're going to build a business that can predictably and sustainably grow free cash flow going into the future. And then you have all the options. Yep. And so we can kick that can down the road by doing the right thing with the business. And let's turn this business into an asset. And then you get to decide what the heck you want
to get out anytime you want, or don't get out.
Or die at your desk. But everything will have been taken care of. All of the topics we've just discussed will need to have been in place. There will be a succession plan, right?
Right.
So anyway, you make a great point there.
Well, I think, at least from my perspective, that's our primary function is to help the business owner have options.
We're in the option creation game. Who was I having that conversation with just the other day? Yeah.
So as a buyer of a business from my father, went through the whole emotional experience for 5 years. The way that it has to happen is the buyer has to understand or feel the lack of chasing his tail. So we had this conversation last week with the potential buyer relative, and they don't want to increase the price of the value of the business and keep on chasing their tail, right? So the seller has to have a certain amount of flexibility, willing to take a haircut in order to have perceived value. So moving the buyer from a signing on the back of the check to signing on the front of the check emotionally is getting through that now there's taken what's considered to be real money, putting it back in the business in order to offset the cost of the purchase. So, and then the buyer in the seller's world, they see the cash staying in the business, and it works for a wonderful model. Now, in those cases, the business evaluation doesn't have to be that sophisticated, because what you're really doing is an internal transfer. Now, IRS and there's other things that need to be, looked at from a taxable standpoint, but by and large, it's really a matter of convincing the buyer and the seller that there's a existing value, and then two is that stock transfer immediately has an increase in value. So if I'm buying it for $1, and when I buy it, it effectively is worth $1.25, as the incoming owner, and this is what I did. I felt pretty good. So I had a commission, $150,000 commission. It was a unicorn client, and we kept the majority of the money in the business. And so I think it's working with the owner to be benevolent, realistic, and if they really want to make this thing happen, and it ended up being kind of a tax play, right? I mean, you look at the ESOP values of the ESOPs, but think about it from the buyer perspective. It's like, I want to know that I'm going to get a immediate bump in my share value by buying these shares. And as they buy in, it's a slow process. It can be. And then if as a consultant to the advisor to the group, that tends to work out itself out into a longer commitment, a much more fruitful commitment, because you're able to play both sides and being able to kind of get the two parties together to realize the legacy part of it, and then the buyer, and getting the buyer's mind. Oftentimes, there's no conversation, Zippo conversations about this in the family, right? This is like
Yeah.
never talk about what's the business is worth, what am I going to do when I die, if I die, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, families are, it is interesting, Joe, because your point's a good one. Families are also often so dysfunctional. They bring that entire dynamic, which is why many of us, I'm thinking of Barry Goodman in particular, but many of us spend our careers only working with family business.
let me add just a few things before, just two observations. One, it was looking as if I was going to be reporting to, or had my mother as a co-owner, because my father, whatever, there was a dynamic there that could very well be. I was not happy with my mother being a co-owner versus my father. And it was really interesting because she approached the business outside of, she really wasn't involved in the business, but I did want to be a co-owner with my mother. So that was one of the some of the things that to work out as a buyer, what are the things that could happen to the seller along the road. And so obviously the issues are very unique in each structure, but fundamentally it's a matter of moving them from signing on the back of the check to the front of the check, and also trying to figure out how to convince the seller to to create a creative way to you're gonna, it's like, when you have a child, and you get them to mow the lawn the first time, you overpay them because they're going to get the money eventually. In the same way with a family transition, eventually they're going to get the money. This guy has a particular client we're talking about is 80 transitional family wealth, right? 80 or $100 million, whatever. So not everybody will spend the money in this world, right? So their kids, they're going to get the money eventually. Early on, you were saying something which I think is really important. It said the family member involved in the business should be the one that gets rewarded for the business success. Put buy real estate, get real estate, put that, as you're trying to divide up the trust, put that into non-participating family members, put that in real estate. Don't make it part of the family business, because
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
it's just separate those things.
Yeah, you start diversifying the issues that would come with it all being resident in one asset.
It's got to feel fair, right? So that's my comment.
Awesome, thanks, Joe.
I think, George, when you bring up family dynamics, I think there's two really important things. One is you got to spend time getting to know the family, and you really got to dig in and understand what those dynamics are. Who is in what role? Why are they in that role? What's the history that brought them there? You can't flippantly just come in and say, oh, I got this solved. And you really got to spend time digging into why everybody's in the position they are, and what are their takes on things. What do they like, not like? What are they mad about? All those things, right? That's the really hard part about family business. I think the second thing is you have to help the family separate business from family. They can't be separated completely, but there are structures like a family council and some other structures that you can create that actually help them feel like they have a voice, even if they're not on the board of the business, or if they're are these non-employee owners. If you can create the right structure and help them feel like they understand, and the communication structure for them to understand what's going on in the business and how this all works, you can alleviate a lot of the problems that go on. Dad just ran it and we never really knew what was going on over there. And so we just, like, it always felt like this black hole over here. Now we actually understand what's going on. We don't have to we'd love to get in there with our wrench and turn the nut, right? But we realize we can't, but at least now we know what the heck's going on in there, right?
Well, yeah, and learning about what's been going on under the hood is, I have some personal experience on that. When you learn what's actually been going on under the hood. One of the challenges, and this goes to having, you have functional families and dysfunctional families, and even functional families have dysfunction. Like there's so many layers of common experience and history and family dynamics, man. A family, even without a business, a family's a messy thing, right? So you make a great point, Eric. And separating the two, I mean, guys, separating the two is that's challenging, right? I get back.
Yeah.
This is why, like, Dr. Alley is in business.
Yeah.
And I've joked about two guys that they both retired now, but they were in this community years ago, and they would show up if it was a family business. They would literally show up on the first day with a psychologist, and the business owner would be like, "Oh, well, this, good to see you, Doug. Good to see you, John. And who's this? Oh, this is Dr. Alley." And like, why is Dr. Alley here? We don't need Dr. Alley. So, well, yeah, you do. You do. You just do. It's if we start talking about the business as an asset, though, once you look under the hood, Eric, that's your I'm sorry, I lost my point there. I lost the thread. It's really early out here, and I have not had coffee. Once you can see under the hood, it can get ugly in a hurry.
Yeah, to be clear, you can't really separate the two. They're intertwined. What you're doing is creating a structure where the two seem separate enough that you can deal with them separately, right? You're creating, it's just like having a husband and wife who work together, spouses who work together, and you say, look, when we're in the office, these are the rules. When we're at home, these are the rules. It's an artificial structure, but that structure helps you to work through the issues of those differences, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because best practices are best practices, and then we start laying in family emotions, and those best practices get flying out the window. Hey guys, I'm going to have to skip. I just wanted to parachute in for a few minutes and say good morning. Great conversation. I'm going to meet with 5,000 of our friendly CPA brethren and keep trying to grow our community.
Conference are you at, George?
The AI CPA Engage conference in Las Vegas. Yeah, it's so far it's been great.
Where are you?
At the Aria.
Okay.
So that's a nice venue, and it's interesting. Just bumped into at dinner the CFO of the AICPA, and he shared some data of this conference, and it's a monster and really good, very well attended, super high energy group of people. So having fun.
Cool. We'll need a report out of what you learned.
It's coming. We'll discuss it next week. And hey, I just want to make sure I'll say it now on the video. We're adding an Ask Me Anything hosted by yours truly on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's a great opportunity for ask me anything. I've already received some Ask Me's by email, and which I guess I'll answer on air, and also a great opportunity for folks on the West Coast who don't feel like coming in here at 6:30 in the morning, which I'm living it today. I can understand. But to come in and participate in the conversation, and there are no rules that Ask Me Anything. I mean, it's right in the title, right? We'll talk about whatever folks want to talk about, from methodology through technology. So any questions before I jump off, guys? Anything I can help anyone with? Okay, well, that's easy.
Yeah. Enjoy your conference.
Is it still like 40 degrees in Roanoke? I see you're in a vest.
I like to keep it, where you can hang meat in my house.
That's what this hotel room is.
Hey, go get coffee.
I'm going to go get coffee. All right, everyone. Have a great week. Anything I can
Take
do?
care, George.
See you, George.
Okay.
Hey, interesting question. Is anybody here use Culture Index or been exposed to it?
Oh, you can't bring that up as I'm walking out. All right.
Get out of here, George. Get out of here. Yes, I actually have I've taken many different ones, but one of the key ones I took that got me into running my own business was a Culture Index profile.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's similar to DISC in some ways.
It's actually a sister. I think the Predictive Index and Culture Index was a split of a group. so they're very similar. Disc there's some overlap because they're in general all of them have some similar characteristics because they all fall under the psychology principles, right?
Yeah. Now I've got a call tomorrow with a one of their national people. So
Okay. Yeah, I actually like Culture Index. Again, I haven't read as many predictive index, but they tend to be similar. I think they're like the model a little better than I like DISC. It's a little more defendable from a hiring standpoint, but I think they're both useful tools.
yeah, I think DISC is a wonderful, cheap way to help people stereotype other people.
Again, just like we talked about separating business and family life, these are structures to help us understand things more than they are true identity things. Because you look at some of the DISC characteristics and you say, well, I'm a high D, okay, but I don't have any characteristics of C or S in me. Life doesn't work that way. We're creating simplistic looks at things to help understand people. They're not meant to be perfect structure, right?
Yeah. Of note, I sent my results to my clients and family members, and everyone 100% agreed with the assessment, even though I didn't like it.
Well, the thing is, whenever you do a 360, you always get a better perspective on where you are. And I used to say to my son when he worked at UPS, they did a 360 every 3 years. And it's amazing how different levels in an organization perceive individuals based on the last fire that occurred,
Yeah.
as opposed to a 3-year assessment. And my son used to write, he said, I put the fires in to let them know that that fire was put out. And they have grown because of the fire, and show that as a developmental achievement that they have now made. And he's employing it right now in the current enterprise, where he's demonstrating to the owner that if you train people to stand on their feet to do a presentation, even if it's a $30 million presentation, they don't need a bag holder to give them support, but just sitting in the room. Let them teach and do the thing that they're prepared to do and lead, and let them do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really valuable. I will say that the result of that 360-degree feedback, Ed, for me was initially quite irritating just because of who I am. But also, like, basically, I've taken a long, hard look, thanks to some work I'm doing with George, taken a long, hard look at my business models and service models. And kind of, I was able to identify where I'm basically fighting against myself to the detriment of my clients. When my clients already know who and how I work, and they really want me to just do that. And so it's now I'm excited. Now I'm excited.
It's interesting, Mike. I've seen both sides of that. I had a good friend here in Milwaukee that I'd known for a long time. And at one point, somebody in a group told him, just be yourself. And he took that, instead of taking that to mean stop trying to pretend to be something, he took that to mean, oh, I can be any jerk I want to be. And he ended up being a real jerk in how he delivered things. Like, I would cringe when he would say things because he would he would be a total jerk about it because somebody told him be yourself.
Yeah.
And he took that to mean go way over here and don't put any, don't sugarcoat your opinions anymore. Just say what's on your mind, which I think is the wrong way to take that kind of interpretation. On the flip side, I've seen people who, and I've experienced this, right? I'm a bald guy with a deep voice and 6'1" and not a small guy. And so I heard early in my career, Eric, you intimidate people. I'm like, intimidate people? I like people. I'm trying to engage with them, but I'm also realized that I have a strong personality, right? I have opinions about things, and I had to learn to tone that down a little bit so that I wouldn't blow people out of the water, right? And so that 360 feedback, Ed, to your point, and Mike, to your point, like that can help you see where those rough edges are if you take it the right way and make it useful.
Again, I'll jump in with another obvious statement. Be yourself for a jerk is probably not good advice. Pretty basic.
I mean, fundamentally, that's the problem I see.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, like Eric, your problem is you're loud and obnoxious. But anyways, it's a volume issue, not a character issue. But like, you know, that's one of the reasons I shied away from disc is I became a master distributor and all that kind of stuff way back in the day with B&I and other stuff with Meisner. And I just saw bad facilitation let souls be convicted of their ability to continue to be assholes, Steve. Right. And it's like, I was like, okay, I would really like to have something where we're not labeling behavioral stuff by dominance or drive or something like that. And you know, it's just interesting. So anyways.
Yeah. I think we often also see those kind of things and read the things we want to read out of them and ignore the parts we don't want to hear, right? And so we hear, oh, you know, strong D, oh, that just means I'm a driven person. Drivenness is a good thing.
Yeah.
Jerkiness is a bad thing. And so it's learning how to balance those things. Being driven can be okay unless you're running over everybody. I had a client, I'm not a small guy, like just height wise and size wise. And I had a client who was like 6'6" and like 300 pounds. And he ran a national repossession firm for business assets. And you can imagine his personality. He was that guy, like you'd see him on TV kind of guy, right? Like he knew how to like intimidate people with his size, and he had an even deeper, stronger voice than I do. And he and I actually hit it off because I would stand in front of him and I just wasn't intimidated by him, right? And so if you call people on he used that intimidation to get what he wanted all the time. But once you called him on it, he actually gained respect for you. And I had his respect the whole time I was working with him because I just wasn't afraid of him physically or intimidation wise, right? In terms of, his loud voice so you have to understand where that stuff is. And a couple of times I had to go to him and say, don't go to people and say this way. It's not going to help you. Right. And when you do that and you do it with their best interests in mind and they see that, you often get their attention and they actually listen to you and you can help them overcome some things that they just can't overcome by themselves.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. Not in defense of DISC, but any DISC or any other technique you want to use.
Oversimplification is the problem.
And the general comment about being self-aware, any characteristic can be good or bad. And that's why for DISC, for example, there's the innate behavioral characteristics and the adapted. The adapted, hopefully, is if you're too dominant, you've learned to mellow your dominance a little bit to get along with people and get stuff done. So
I always say it's the internal versus the external manifestation. Like even with this culture index, my adaptive, they call it something else. My adaptive is much more compressed versus the innate. And I always say, like, how you are on the inside, like what moves you and what powers you, does not necessitate how you behave.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, you're in charge of how you manifest.
Yeah.
Jocko Willink, extreme ownership.
Rather than manifesting wealth, I'm manifesting a full head of hair.
Yeah, it's working. I mean, I can see it, sort of.
That's a rock.
Yeah, let me squint my eyes.
Yeah.
That way you and Ed get superimposed.
There's a hair right up here.
Yeah. So, hey, I'm going to have to run, guys. This was good. Hey, Joe, I really appreciate the stuff you're sharing about with your family business. That was huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to follow the numbers, but it's the emotional thing is what drives the whole thing. It's not about the money. It really isn't. And so we got to remember that these guys have a hard time articulating what it is they want, and the family members have been fear of misstepping. I've done it and stepped in it, and my father said, if that's your attitude, then I don't want you in it. And I've lost out on an opportunity to be involved with another piece of business. But so emotionally, there's some eggshell walking going on. So that's the work of trying to get that conversation feeling more natural, and with that then becomes opening the gates to. So for instance, in this particular case, we met with the client's CPA that night, and we talked about doing spending some money trying to figure out if they should go ESOP or not, for instance. But if that conversation hadn't happened 2 hours earlier, the opportunity for him to get more business didn't occur. So we have to do a good job of also tying back our compadres in this whole thing to see, now all of a sudden you've done the linkage and you brought it out, but you also give them an alternative, someplace to look for an answer. And that's important. If we bring up the sore subject or whatever that is, we got to be able to have alternate cures for it versus just leaving them hanging and no place to go. So that's my other piece of advice is if we open up the wound, we got to figure out how to put a Band-Aid on it or relatively quickly, or it would just fester and not be positive.
Yeah, don't do seagull management.
Right. And that's the long-term relationship that you're trying to build, right? So that's a perfect scenario. So, all right.
Awesome.
See you guys. Have a good week.
You too. Bye.
Ed, call me sometime, brother.
See you guys.
This episode is brought to you by the Growth Drive Summit. Our theme this year is building a profitable advisory business. Join us in Charleston, South Carolina, October 6th, 7th, and 8th. Expand your network, learn new skills, and generally have a good time. This is a top-rated event. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.